So good morning, everybody. Good afternoon. I think we're right at 12 o'clock. And thank you very much for attending the November Women in Technology virtual group meeting. We're really glad that you guys have decided to join us today. I appreciate it. I let people know a few minutes before 12 that I am both running the webinar today and presenting the webinar today, so that if you ask me a question, it could take me a couple of minutes to notice that it's over there. But if you do have a question, feel free to type it in, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. So let's get started today. As you guys know, this is the Past Women in Technology virtual group. There are about 40 different virtual groups that you could choose from to attend a session, and I'm pleased that you found us today. If you can, both men and women that are attending, find a mentor, be a mentor, build a strong network of women. It matters. It makes a huge difference in your career. I need to thank our two sponsors this year, and that thanks goes to both Century One and Redgate. It is an embarrassment of riches that we have two sponsors that want to contribute to the people who attend our sessions. You can always check us out on YouTube. Just do a search for Pass Wit. Every session that we do is recorded, and I try to get that uploaded within a couple of hours. So feel free to hit me up via email or Twitter or something if you don't see it. You can always check out our homepage for upcoming sessions, wit.sequelpass.org. If you are a member of the virtual chapter, you can get our monthly newsletter, and Kathy Kellenberger, my co-leader, works really hard on those. If you have an article or a blog or something that you think she would be interested in and that other people would be interested in, send it to us at witvc@sequelpass.org. We'd love to hear from you. Follow us on Twitter at @pass_wit, and use and follow the hashtag #PassWit if you want to share information with us that way. We'd love to hear from you. We have some upcoming Sequel Saturdays that have some amazing women speakers. Wow. Yeah. I keep forgetting that it's almost Thanksgiving here in the States, and that it's so late in November already. But Talon, Salvador, and Concepcion are both coming up this weekend. There's nothing in the States the weekend of Thanksgiving, but Providence is coming up the same weekend as Washington, D.C., and I'll be presenting there along with several of past and future Sequel Saturday, Pass Wit virtual chapter speakers. So if you're in any of those areas, come for a day of free training. Upcoming Women in Tech webinars. Next month we'll have Julie Smith with her session Heck and Sweet Reports. It is she uses Power BI to scrape data and present it in a really entertaining way, using the Twitter account @DogRates, who I follow and love. In January, we will have Monica Rathbun, who now works for Denny Cherry and Associates. I'm surviving as a lone DBA. And in February, we'll have Amy Harold, Deadlocks, Blocks, and Two Smoking Barrels, breaking down blocking and deadlocks. Today's session, or upcoming session next month, this is the one I was just mentioning. And I've seen it both online and in person, and it's really cute. I love it. Today's session, we're going to talk, it's called Let Her Finish. We're going to talk about supporting women's voices in IT. And hopefully you guys learn both that it's a problem and some skills on how to prevent the problem in the future. So let's do this. So I am Irish. You can follow me at Irish Sequel. You can find me at my blog at repedia.net, where I blog typically on women in tech issues. Every once in a while it's technical focused. I am here in Atlanta, Georgia, where I am very active in our user group. I work with a fantastic committee to put on SQL Saturday Atlanta. I facilitate WIP panel and speak at tech events all over the United States. And as you just heard, I am the co-leader for the Women in Technology virtual chapter. Lots of ways for you to get in touch with me, should you choose. You can follow me on Twitter or send me an email. It's a really complicated email address, right? Difficult to remember. Or hit me up on LinkedIn if you'd like. So the next time you attend a meeting, watch what happens when a woman in the meeting offers her idea. And if your offer is like most, you'll find that women are interrupted much more frequently than men are, at 3 times the rate, actually. Sometimes the interruption is meant to be helpful and to offer support when you're good friends or when you have a close relationship. These kind of interruptions are meant to be affirmations instead of interruptions. But sometimes these are to assert dominance and to put a woman in her place, or to just not respect her with the same level that you do another colleague. But regardless of the intent, the result is the same, and that is that women are being left out of the conversation.
Can I finish my sentence?
No.
That's it then.
Hey, Missy, shut up.
Hey, Kelly. I'm sorry, go ahead.
خلاص طب اسكتي حتى استطيع ان اتكلم.
17 minutes past the hour. We shouldn't be talking about theories that has theories about choices out there.
Pakistan. And I can't believe I'm about to
You're gonna cut me off. Goodbye, and I'll see you next time round, Jen. Putin doesn't control everything that happens
Very
in
different.
Russia. I know, but
We're getting absurd now.
I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time.
So all of these are a little exaggerated examples. I do hate the phrase manterruption. I think it sounds a little too cute or makes it seem entertaining as opposed to rude. So although I'm pro mansplaining, I'm pro that word, because I think it applies the appropriate tone to something that is ridiculous. So let's talk about speaking while female. So a study in 2015 found that men not only interrupted twice as often as women do, that they were 3 times as likely to interrupt women. Women almost never interrupt men. Now, women do interrupt other women, just not at the same rate that men interrupt women. So this isn't just men shouting us down and men talking over us. This is about women being passive in conversation or being not heard, or when they do speak up, having somebody interrupt and talk over them and things like that. So further proof, an Australian study, again in 2015, found that women don't speak as much without interruption as men, and that's where the men and women part comes in. Of 311 interruptions that questions a speaker's authority or credibility, 213 of those were directed toward women. Female witnesses were called emotional, unreasonable, or words to similar effect 163 times, and 120 of those comments were made by men. Women were far more likely to be punished for their interruptions than by their male peers, by the chair during a public hearing. So this particular Australian study looked at public conversations and whether this was city council meetings, their parliament, court cases, different things of that nature that were public events in nature. That's where they did this. They weren't attending private company meetings, calculating this kind of stuff. So it's an issue. I mean, it's a real issue, even when women are professional equals. So at the 2015 South by Southwest Gender and Diversity Panel, now South by Southwest is more than just a music festival. It's music, it's art, it's performance. They host a full 7 days conference where they talk about global business issues. And diversity is a huge part of that. And during a panel discussion where the Google executive chair, Eric Schmidt, repeatedly interrupted the US CTO, Megan Smith. She was the only female panelist on the stage with him during the talk. And only when they got to the Q&A session and an audience member asked Eric Schmidt, are you aware of how frequently Eric Schmidt and the other panelist, whose name escapes me, but he is the biographer for Steve Jobs. By the way, all three on this diversity panel were white, but that's a different session I give. But only after Judith Williams, who is the Google's global diversity manager, brought this to his attention, did he even realize he was doing it. And of course, once she asked this question, the crowd went nuts, big uproarious applause, because there's a lot of women in the room, and they had all noticed it. This is what it's like being a woman. This was just another day that ends in Y. And that's what it's like in a meeting. So it happens even to women on the Supreme Court. So the men in the Supreme Court, in a session in 2016, spent a lot of time interrupting the two youngest female justices, Justice Elena Kagan and Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Now, Sotomayor was interrupted 57 times during arguments. Elena Kagan was cut off 50 times. Breyer, Roberts, Kennedy, and Alito, all male, were interrupted somewhere between 24 and 27 times during this particular session. Now, the only female justice who is not interrupted at a greater rate than the males is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And the prevailing theory on why not is because she is very petite and very soft-spoken, and when she and doesn't speak frequently, and when she does, it actually happens to be pretty profound, I think. But so the prevailing theory is that there is no way to interrupt and talk over her without coming across as aggressive and without realizing that you're doing it. I mean, you have no choice but to be aware that you're doing this. So now, most recently, so February of 2017, Senator Elizabeth Warren, who's a Democrat from Massachusetts, was officially silenced while reading a letter on the Senate's floor. Now, the letter, which had been authored by Coretta Scott King 30 years before, had already been read into the congressional record in 1986 by Ted Kennedy. The letter was precisely on point because they were discussing whether or not Jeff Sessions could support the civil rights of all Americans. Now, 30 years before, he had been nominated to be a federal judge, and he was not confirmed for that position. Now, if you think her being cut off and officially silenced, so her punishment for attempting to read and reread this letter was to sit there silently the remainder of the time they discussed Jeff Sessions. Now, if you think this is just an example of politics and not sexism, there are 4 names on the bottom of your screen. These senators were allowed to read the letter in part or in total within the next 24 hours without interruption and without punishment. And I assume you guys all know, other than they're also Democrats, what they have in common, and that's that they're men. So they just like to pick on Elizabeth Warren, maybe? So let's talk about gender disparity and the feminized society myth. Now, Gina Davis, yes, that Gina Davis, the actress, has founded an Institute for Gender and Media Studies, and what they do is, one of the many things that they do is they examined how present men and women are in media today, and that's television, movies, news, different things like that. One of the experiments they did was to calculate how much screen and speaking time both men and women got in particular aspects of media. And then when they had people watch these, they asked, at what point do you perceive men and women got equal screen and speaking time, or gender parity? And astoundingly, when women were 17% present, or 17% of speaking time, men perceived parity. They said, oh yeah, this show was right at 50-50. 17%. It's not because men are bad at math. Just ask them. They'll tell you they're great at math. And when women reached 33% of the presence in a movie, TV, news, or whatever, men perceived that there were more women than men. One study found that women had to make up 60 to 80% of the attendees in a meeting to occupy equal time in the conversation. And when they asked, is gender parity in business important? 80% of the women said, yes, this is important to me. But only 48% of men thought gender parity was important or was even an issue at all. So, what do all of these great things have in common? They're all Disney movies, and they're all targeted at a female audience. They all have female stars, with the exception of Aladdin. I think Jasmine was not quite as much the star of the movie as she was these other things. The movie Frozen, right? Two sisters, heroes, very, very important to the plot of this movie, right? What if I told you that the females only spoke or had screen time 41% of this movie? They're not in the majority in this movie. But this is clearly a female movie, right? It's targeted for girls. But male characters got more time. Now, this is something that changed over time. Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, which obviously came out before I was born. Snow White was released in 1937. Sleeping Beauty a few years after that. Sleeping Beauty, women have speaking parts 71% of the time. Now, obviously, that's because most of the main characters are female. 71% of the time. Cinderella, it's 60% of the time female characters get to speak. But fast forward to 1989 to 1999, when animated Disney movies and the whole princess market became a big deal, and those numbers change. Pocahontas, the number of the percentage of female speaking time is 24%. For Mulan, a movie about a girl warrior who saves China, females speak only 23% of the time. In Aladdin, women speak 10% of the time. Now, why have we never noticed this? Why do we watch these movies and think it's a girls' movie, and it's a movie about girls, and that girls or women are the majority of the movie? And the answer is that a fish doesn't know it's in water. We are surrounded by an environment where men get all of the speaking time and get all of the screen time already, and so that's what we perceive as normal. So that when women are actually in the majority, or even get close to half, it's enough to make us feel like women are getting equal. And it's because our definition of average is skewed. It's all about perception here. So why is this even a problem, whether or not women get to speak equally? If anybody has any questions at this point, let me know. I don't see any, but it would be pretty easy for me to miss them. And I think right now we're good. Okay. Come on. Okay. So why is this even a problem? Who cares, right? It cares because the wage gap is real. Or I care because the wage gap is real, and that's why it matters. Do I want respect? Of course I want respect, but I also want you to pay me equitably. I want you to review me equitably. So male executives who speak more often than their peers are actually rewarded with 10% higher ratings of competence. But when a female executive speaks more than her peers, she's punished with 14% lower ratings. I was reading some studies last night, and I absolutely was blown away by the numbers of how frequently women get words like bossy and aggressive, or watch your tone in reviews, but how infrequently men do. For one particular example, those kind of specific words were only used twice out of almost 100 reviews for men, but it was used like more than half of reviews for women. Men get words like assertive, or, we get aggressive. So in 2015, a University of Texas study showed that when a woman challenged an existing process and suggested a new one, she was actually labeled as disloyal. And this was, they were looking at group dynamics. They didn't set out for this to be a gender study. They were looking at group decision-making and group dynamics. And they were told they were there to look at an inventory tracking system for a bookstore or bookseller or something like that. And they were supposed to evaluate the system. Each group that met, researchers told one person in the group where the flaw was in the system. So when a woman said, hey, here's where the issue is, this is where a process is broken and could use fixing, when people in the group evaluated other people in the group, she was considered disloyal. Even when people in the group were told, hey, by the way, this person possesses knowledge that the rest of you don't have, her ideas weren't discounted, they weren't listened to. But in those group settings where the person they identified to get the information was a man, those same things did not apply. Hold on. So I do finally have a question. Let me look at it really quick. Yeah. I will comment on that later, Jean. I hear you. I get it. Okay. So, let's go back. Let's finish this. So when women's voices aren't being heard in meetings, when they aren't assigned these stretch projects that get them noticed, they don't get promoted, they don't get assigned to the next big things. And essentially that means guys get to work on the glamour work while women get to do the IT housekeeping. We're the ones who get to do administrative work. So let's solve this problem, okay? Anytime I ever do a WIP panel or a webinar or a session in person, when I present you with a problem, expect me to present you with some solutions, okay? So that's where we're going next. So years ago, while producing the hit TV series The Shield, Glenn Mazzara noticed that two young female writers were quiet during story meetings, and he wasn't hearing any ideas from them. So he pulled them aside and he encouraged them to speak up. He goes, I want to hear from you. And they said, watch what happens when we do. So he did. He paid attention. And almost every time they started to speak, they were interrupted or shot down before they were finishing. If they did have a good idea, a male writer jumped in and would run with it before they could even complete their thoughts. So he found a clever solution, and it's not groundbreaking, guys. He instituted a no interruption policy for everyone. He recognized that there's a reason he hired these people, and he wanted them to be a team. And the more diverse your team is, the more diverse the background of your team is, the better ideas they come up with. This doesn't just work for television shows. This works for IT solutions as well. You build better products because if you have a group of 5 people in a room and they're all about the same age and they're all the same race and they all have the same socioeconomic and education background, they're going to come up with the same ideas. And when team member 1 says, hey, I have this idea, it'll work, because that matches the life view of team member 2 and 3, they're going to go, oh yeah, that totally makes sense, because to them it does. But if you come from a different socioeconomic background or you're a different gender, male or female, you come with a different set of tools. So your idea is going to be slightly different because your perspective is slightly different. Car designers, it amazes me how often car designers don't have a woman sit in the car before they put a minivan on the market. They don't have a woman sitting there and see how she behaves in the car, what she does. She's going to check on her kids that are in the back seat. Does she want a backup camera? Is it at an angle that works for her? How does she adjust the radio? All of these little things, sometimes they forget, and they don't get around to it. So, simply instituting a no interruption policy and enforcing it made this show better. Ratings got better, ad dollars got better, the show got more successful. Another solution, and this one I love. The Obama administration, by its second term, had the most diverse cabinet and staff of any previous president. Now, when he first started out, his cabinet looked a lot like every other cabinet, but nobody makes it through 4 to 8 years with the president. So as these people kind of graduated from the program, they were replaced by a far more diverse cast. And that meant more women. But even though there were more women working for the Obama White House, they realized that either they weren't being let into important meetings, and then when they finally were, they were ignored. However, they came up with a plan, and I think it's brilliant. Once a woman got invited to the meeting, she would invite another woman into the discussion. Hey, you know who'd be a good fit to help solve this? Janice. Janice would be great for this. So they would invite her into the meeting. And then they adopted a meeting strategy that they called amplification. And when a woman made a key point or came up with an idea, another woman in the meeting would repeat what she said and give credit to the woman who said it. This forced the men in the room to recognize the contribution of the woman, and it denied them the chance to take credit for it. And even denied them the ability to take her initial thought and kind of run with it and then take all the glory, because this female owned it. And I've actually done this more than a few times since I first read about this, and it works. It works beautifully, and it's so simple. And it doesn't even have to be another woman in the meeting who does this. If your name is John and you're sitting in a meeting and you notice that this happens, you get to do this too. You get to be an ally to this woman in the meeting. And you get to be a hero for a day. So let's talk about dealing with this interruption, okay? How do you handle it when you're interrupted? So there's a few different ways that work. One of them is to let it go and to let the person finish their interruption And then instead of disengaging and taking a step back, to follow up with a question. That's a great, I see that you've added so-and-so to my idea. How would you incorporate this and this? Sometimes it's better to be a bit indirect. And that is to let the person interrupt and let them finish what they're going to say, and then start over and repeat again exactly what you started saying in a polite but respectful tone. Okay? Another way is to add in a hand gesture, and you can put out your finger or your hand with your palm facing slightly above parallel to the ground. Now, not shoulder height, not like you're saying, stop, because that can be perceived as aggressive by male or female. But just, and kind of make that face, you guys know what I'm talking about, where you hold the finger up and go, hang on, let me finish. And you can do that without having to say those words. Another thing is, if you're sitting next to that person in a meeting, is to touch their hand with your finger or touch their arm. I promise you they'll stop speaking when you do this. I promise you. It'll throw anybody off their game. You just touch them, and you can make that face again. Hang on, let me finish. Another option is to just keep talking like they didn't interrupt you at all. This is actually the most difficult thing on this list to do. Women are taught to be polite, and it's why we're so successfully interrupted. We're socialized to have a lower threshold of what's considered rude. So even though this person interrupted us, we somehow think it's rude to keep talking. But if you can do it, it works. Just keep talking, and eventually they'll have to stop, or they'll look like an idiot, which has its benefits too, right? So 10 words every woman should learn. Okay? Tattoo these on your body if you have to. I just said that. Stop interrupting me, and I'm not finished. I have a whole other slew of advice or different things that I mention when I do this. Like, it's so weird. I opened my mouth and your voice came out, or different things like that. So I have another question here that I will get back to in a minute. So 10 words every woman should learn, but we can't do it alone. Here are 10 words every man should learn. She just said that. Stop interrupting her. Can't believe I've never found this, and she's not finished. Now, if you come across a woman in your working career who is getting interrupted frequently, if you're not comfortable stepping up and saying, she just said that, and stop interrupting her, my advice to you is to pull her aside after a meeting and say, hey, I noticed this is a problem. Can I help you with this? Here's what I'd like to do. And ask her how she wants you to handle this. Okay, so before I move on, I'm going to take a quick look at questions. So I have, some of these are more comments. When I speak up and have to say the same thing a number of times, I am labeled as stressed. Well, you are stressed. You have people talking over you all the time. That would stress me out too. There's some commentary on primal qualities of men and women, and how men are more aggressive by their nature because they're hunters and gatherers. And I can tell you that is a book that is written by an anthropologist and not a psychologist. And I'm not sure I entirely agree or disagree with that assessment. But let me see. I'm not sure there's quite a question in there. So this is great commentary. So I'll just read it. Men or women, we all have the ability to influence others in a positive way. I understand men and women are different. However, I truly feel like whether you are male or female, you are either respectful or not. You either work hard or not. You either react politely or not. And whether you are male or female, I believe we all have the same ability to be respectfully direct and thrive. I don't disagree with this. Sometimes people are just jerks, and they're not being a sexist. They're not doing it to you because you're a woman and they're a man. They're doing it because and everybody knows who this guy is, right? He's the one who he makes sexist jokes, he makes racist jokes, he eats your food in the fridge. He's that guy. So everybody has that guy. That's not who we're talking about today. We are talking about the systemic problem and the results of women's voices not being heard in IT. So I hope that addressed your comment appropriately. So let's move on. There are a lot of things that women do to undermine the way they communicate. We say sorry and just way too often. We'll start a phrase with sorry, but why? We're not really. Stop apologizing. I think on the next slide I have an example of this and how to do it. Upspeak is a rising intonation at the end of a sentence. Because my age starts with a 4, I'm not as good at this as some of my younger counterparts. But upspeak, or the rising intonation at the end of a sentence, has the ability to turn a statement into a question. Today is Wednesday. Do you think I know what day it is when I said that? Today's Wednesday. Today's Wednesday? Do you think I know what day it is? Maybe I know what day it is. This is considered an undermining way of speaking, and it cuts your credibility. However, people who are in their early 20s are far less likely to think that. And it's probably because they're awash in it. All their friends talk that way, and they know that their friends are competent. But to people probably 30 or older, hearing this on somebody else, it makes us think that you don't know what you're talking about. It makes us think that you're okay. So Jennifer asks, what is an example of starting a sentence with just or using just in an undermining way? And this is my flaw. When I am talking in a meeting and I want someone to explain their point on something, or I want a dev to defend this bad code he's written, I'll say things like, I'm just asking questions. I'm just trying to make sure I understand. I'm not just anything. I'm asking questions. It's my job. I'm not just trying to get answers. I hope that example kind of answers your questions. It is something I'm really guilty of, and it is something that I work on all the time. And I even force myself to go back through and read a Teams message before I send it, or an email before I send it out, or when I'm writing chapters or anything like that. I will go back through and specifically look for that word to take it out. It is a limiting word. So I hope that helped. So I was talking to 2 young girls at my office about Upspeak, and this wonderful young lady named Alyssa says to me, I think I do that? Oh my God, I do that! And then she ran out of the room. So I felt really bad, but it did not at all change the way Alyssa speaks. Vocal fry, I cannot do, I cannot stand. It is an unnaturally low, creaky voice. If you want to know what this is or what this sounds like, do a YouTube search for Kim Kardashian vocal fry. She does this thing at the end of her sentences where she makes this sound that sounds like the alien to me. That little creaky waver to her voice. I want to stab myself in the ear when somebody hears it, or when I hear it when somebody does it. But it is considered an undermining way women communicate, that it takes away from your professionalism and makes people take you less seriously. So hold on. So here's the example of sorry. Now this is a commercial, so I'm not endorsing this product, but it's a great example of what women do. Well, if I were smart enough to work it.
Sorry, can I ask a stupid question? Sorry, do you have a minute? Sorry. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Hey, there he is. Hi, Bryce. Sorry. Sorry. Sorry, you go first. I was gonna say. I have a question. Why don't we go back to the original thing that we did? Morning. You got a minute? Sorry, not sorry. Sorry, not sorry.
So I hope that provided a good example for how we start sentences, or when we apologize for being in someone's way when they're the ones walking where we're standing. Oh, sorry, let me move out of your way, when that person could have walked around us. So I mentioned this earlier. One theory holds that being perceived as rude is so abhorrent to women that we need to make ourselves less intrusive before we speak up. I'm sorry, but... And then we go in with something that might be really profound or really important. We started it with, I'm sorry. One way that women, I use this example to talk about how women are so sensitive about being less obtrusive or perceived as being rude. A woman gets on an elevator in an empty building. She's leaving work late, or it's a parking garage, whatever it is. She gets on an elevator to leave, and she pushes the first floor. A few floors later, a single man gets on, and he is now going to ride the elevator down to the first floor with her. Odds are pretty good he's harmless, and he intends her no harm at all. Seriously, statistically, odds are good he's a great guy, but he looks exactly like the guys who aren't great and who do mean us harm. And because we can't tell the difference, we should probably get off that elevator instead of being trapped in a 5x5 box with a man that outweighs us by 100 pounds and that we don't know. But, so every alarm bell is going off in our head that says, I'm uncomfortable, I don't like this, get off this elevator. But we don't. We stay on that elevator all the way to the first floor, because if we suddenly hit the 6th floor button and get off there, then he'll know that we thought he was capable of violence or capable of harming us, and that would hurt his feelings. So we ignore our instincts and we stay on that elevator because we don't want to seem rude to a man we don't know and to a man we're never going to see again. And so where did we learn this behavior? We learned it from our moms. So blame her. Blame your grandmother and blame your aunts, because they're the ones who are the most influential in how we behave. How many times you listening that are moms have said to your daughter, just be nice. Be nice. Behave. Don't be loud. Be quiet, sit in the back. I do it. I try to be conscious of it, but I also don't want to raise a rude child. So there's a balance in there somewhere that we need to find. And we're just not there yet. So now, and it's also not what we're saying, it's what we're not saying, okay? Interrupt and voice your opinion and make sure you're heard. If what you have to say is important, own it. Don't start with sorry. If somebody interrupts you, interrupt back. If you have something important to say, make sure you get it out there. It matters. Why? Well, because not having your voice heard sucks. I mean, feeling underserved and under-recognized matters. It matters because women aren't entering tech because of biases and inequality. If we could stop the flow of women leaving tech, we would have an additional 225,000 bodies to do jobs. Right now, there aren't enough people to fill tech positions. And they're leaving because tech is not awesome. The Brogammer culture, I get it. I can take a joke. I can make a joke. But I shouldn't have to be conscious of it all the time. And I don't care about your sexual innuendo t-shirt. And why does it matter? Because as I mentioned earlier, a more diverse team produces a better result every time. So it's not just a pipeline issue. It's not just about women coming into tech. It's about women leaving tech. And they're leaving tech at twice the rate that men are. High school STEM programs report that they have a 50% ratio of men and women. Yet men are employed in STEM twice as often as women. At larger tech companies, men outnumber women 4-1. At the big companies, the big tech companies, Google, Microsoft, Intel, Twitter, Amazon, and maybe IBM, I'd have to look. The women that work for their company hover at about 30%. And that's company wide. In IT, it's closer to 16%. It's like 15.6% is what that average is. And in management, it's only 22%. So men outnumber us greatly in tech companies. Women are holding positions outside of tech. They're in marketing, they're in accounting, they're in HR. But actually doing tech jobs, it's much less than that. Now, why 30%? 30% of any minority is enough to put one member of that minority in every meeting. So if your company is 30% women, odds are pretty good when you have a meeting, there's just at least one woman there. There's at least one African American there. Name your minority group. And that's enough to make people feel comfortable and to make people feel like they're diverse. We must be diverse. Lori's in a meeting with me. We have a woman. So women who are currently in tech, 27% reported feeling stalled in their careers. That number is 48% for African American women. And 32% of women surveyed reported they are likely to quit their IT job within the next year. Now, that's not just quitting the job and going to something else. That's quitting tech. So let's see. So question right now is, how much of this do you think is women getting underpaid and being misidentified in the data? I'm a DBA, but in addition to being an analyst, my title is program analyst. So I'm not currently reflected correctly. Kirby, I would say that that's not the bulk of the problem. That if your title is program analyst, but you still fall under the IT department, you would be identified as being in IT. I do think a lot of this is the problem that women get underpaid, and that's a whole different webinar that I do, and there's a lot of reasons why. Studies have shown that when two identical resumes are sent out, one for Karen and one for Brian, that people reading the resume are far more likely to be interested in the male resume, and they will offer, if they do offer the job to the woman or say that they would be interested in the woman, quite often they recommend a much lower salary. I think the greatest disparity was a 40% gap from Karen versus Brian, who are made up people, but have the same work history, the same education history. So there is an unconscious bias when it comes to hiring. So women start out at lower salaries. We are also not socialized to ask for a raise, again, because it's rude or it's hubris to brag about yourself. It's actually a real thing. So why are women leaving tech? You only have to glance at Twitter or the news to answer that question. I don't know if any of you read the Google Manifesto, read it in its entirety. I can tell you, if you're so angry about something, hold on, I have to answer a question. So if you're so angry about something at your company that you feel the need to write 10 to 15 pages about it and publish that to people, odds are pretty good it's you, that maybe you have some anger issues. But this Google Manifesto did some things. He couched things in what is called benevolent sexism. And that is where women don't make good programmers because they're nurturers, because they're better at this kind of thing, which isn't true. And I always, when I get to this point in my presentation, I always say the same thing. I'm not a better nurturer. Ask my daughter. She'll tell you I'm very much a rub some dirt on it kind of woman. The Uber harassment is why women are leaving tech. There's a blog post, and I'm not going to cover it today, and I'm not going to have time, where a male and a female coworker got their signatures switched in their emails. And so she had the most productive week of her life. He had the most frustrating week of his life. So why women leave tech? Lack of helpful mentorship. When women receive mentorship, it's advice on how they should change, or it's personality criticism. With men, they're given concrete steps for career moves. The organizational climate. Women often describe feeling like an outsider in what they say is a mildly discriminatory environment. And that's that Brogammer culture that I don't think I have to describe to you guys. I think you know what I'm talking about. Unclear evaluation criteria. Women are quite frequently given vague, unactionable feedback. Men with a highly visible leadership style are described positively, while women are described as abrasive or running over people. Sometimes company and HR policies make it harder for women to stay employed. In our culture, women are typically the primary caregivers. I know this is shifting a little bit, but we're still the ones who quite often have to take off work when our kid is sick and have to go to the doctor. Luckily in IT, we can quite often work from home, but some companies don't have that policy. Some companies don't have maternity leave. The wage gap is a problem, and a lot of companies don't have a lack of flexibility. So as we've covered before, women cite a lack of visibility on stretch assignments. And those stretch assignments are the ones that are important to the company and get you noticed. Women have to prove themselves over and over. I have to explain what it is that I want to do more frequently than my male coworkers do. And untrained managers. I think this is a problem that is semi-unique to IT in that He made a great developer, so they made him a team lead. He made a great team lead, so they made him a manager. But along the way, the company offered him no management training and didn't provide him the skill set he needed to manage. So he manages by being buddies with all the developers. And he has a female or two that work in the department that he's not buddies with. So he doesn't know how to communicate as a manager, not just with a female. He doesn't know how to communicate and manage people in any other way except hanging out and getting a beer. So hold on. Okay, I answered that question. Let's go. So solutions that reverse women leaving tech. Your company can do this. Make sure that men and women with equivalent credentials start out at equal levels and that the rate is competitive within the industry. Engage and empower senior male and female executives to do something that's called sponsorship. And sponsorship is more than mentorship. It's more than advice. This involves the senior executive using their influence to get the female's ideas heard or to get them assigned to stretch assignments. Make performance standard crystal clear with granular detail and actionable advice focused on performance instead of on vague advice. Please don't tell me that I need to watch my tone or I need to not sigh or laugh or whatever, because I will come back at you with a list of every time a man did that in a meeting. Train managers on providing actionable feedback in performance reviews and then hold them accountable. Your company, your HR department should hold hiring managers accountable. And then institute HR policies that don't penalize women and encourage flexibility. And I will wrap it up with these great quotes that just make me happy. The last one is my favorite. She needed a hero, so that's what she became. So let me take a look again at the questions before we go and make sure that I was able to answer everything while I scroll through this. And if you have any additional questions, now is the time. And Chris Hyde, if you're still on the call, I saw your tweet earlier about how hard I type. And I'll tell you that I actually was typing on a completely different laptop nearby, and I apparently just pound on the keys. So I wasn't even typing on the laptop I'm running the webinar from. So sorry if I type loud. Not really. I'm not sorry. I type fast. So you can all get over it. So do I have any additional questions? And those of you who have made some comments or even paid me a compliment during the session, I really appreciate it. I appreciate that you're interactive. It means that you're listening. So let me see if I answered. I did. I have answered everything that you guys have asked of me today. So I appreciate you taking the time to attend today. And I have picked 2 winners of our session, and I hope they're still online, of $50 Amazon gift cards should be coming to you, one from Redgate, one each from Redgate and from Century One. And I'm going to butcher your name, and for that I'll apologize, but maybe $50 will make up for it. And the first one is Irina Sviridova. If you're still on, expect an email from me. And Lori Carr. Those 2 are our gift card winners, and I will put those in with HR, and they will take care of it. They'll come from Pass. So thank you all very, very much for attending today. Yes, Jennifer, I can make the slides available if you want. Send me an email, reirish@gmail.com, and I'll reply with my slides as a PDF. The video should go up on YouTube later today. So Christina, send me an email because once I close this webinar, your email address is going to go away and I won't have it. So reirish@gmail.com, and I'll send you these slides. I can probably post them on my blog, repedia.net. I'll see if I can do that. If I don't, oh, sorry, it's Irish@gmail.com. So RIE is my first name. Irish is my last name. Or you can hit me up on Twitter @IrishSQL. So thank you all very, very much for attending today. I really, really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll see you next month when Julie Smith presents on Power BI.